Let me tell you what I used to do. Maybe you've done it too. I would leave a conversation or an argument, or even just a weird email exchange, and spend the next 2 hours, sometimes days, replaying it in my head. I'd rewrite what I said, imagine the perfect response, wonder if I should have added just a little more explanation so they'd get it. I'd think maybe if I just said it this way, maybe if I added this example, maybe if I sent a follow-up, and here's what I've learned often the hard way. When someone doesn't want to understand you, no amount of explaining will ever be enough. And if you're not careful, you'll spend your whole life trying to be understood by people who have already decided not to listen. Overexplaining is a survival strategy, not connection. We don't start our lives explaining ourselves. Little kids don't walk around giving 5 reasons why they like the color red. They don't try to justify why they want to wear their superhero cape to the grocery store. They just want what they want. They just feel what they feel. And it's beautiful. But something happens along the way. Usually slowly and usually early. We start getting messages subtle and loud that our feelings are too much, our thoughts are wrong, or that our reactions make people uncomfortable. And so we start editing. We start packaging ourselves into versions we think will be more palatable, more acceptable, less us. That's the moment we start believing if I just explain it better, they'll accept me. If I explain myself just right, I'll finally belong. Here's the thing. Over-explaining isn't about clarity. It's not about helping others understand. It's about earning safety. It's a defense mechanism dressed up like communication. When I used to catch myself explaining the same thing 3 different ways in one conversation, usually something about how I felt or why I needed a boundary, I started realizing, this isn't about one. Understanding isn't owed, it's offered them understanding. This is about me needing to be accepted. It's about fear. And fear always wants to be managed by control. In this case, trying to control how others see me. But connection. Real connection doesn't live in the place where you have to perform to be seen. It doesn't grow in the soil of constant justification. It grows in honesty, in presence, and in mutual respect. And when you're explaining yourself to someone over and over again, and they're still not listening, and still not seeing you, that's not connection. That's a performance with no audience. In my research on shame and vulnerability, one of the most consistent findings was this. The more someone over-explains their truth, the more likely they are to be carrying unprocessed shame. Shame tells us we have to prove ourselves worthy, and proving ourselves often looks like excessive explaining. I know I said no, but here are 5 reasons why I had to. I didn't mean to upset you. I just experiment. I promise I'm not trying to be difficult. You know what those statements all have in common? They're trying to soften the blow of simply showing up honestly. Now, I'm not saying we should never clarify or communicate. Of course not. But there's a big difference between communicating to connect and explaining to be tolerated. One comes from groundedness. The other comes from scarcity, from the fear that if we're not understood, we're not safe. So here's what I've learned to ask myself. Am I explaining this because I want to build a bridge, or because I'm afraid they'll leave me behind if I don't? And if the answer is fear, I pause. I remember that the people who are meant to walk with me won't need a PowerPoint presentation to validate my worth. You are not a pitch deck. You don't need to convince people of your humanity. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can say is nothing. Just stand in your truth. Let it be enough. Because if someone is only willing to accept the version of you they've already decided on, no amount of explaining will change that you deserve to be understood by people who are actually listening. Some people listen to respond, not to understand. Let's just say it plainly, not everyone who's listening to you is actually listening to you. Some are just waiting for their turn to speak. Some are collecting mental ammo to argue back, and some are already halfway out of the conversation. And not physically, but emotionally, they're checked out, but still nodding. That's not understanding. That's performance. That's surface. One of the hardest truths I've had to accept both in my own life and in my work is that not every conversation is built for connection. And here's what's even trickier. Some of the most painful disconnections happen in conversations that look like connection on the outside. By sitting across from someone trying to explain your heart, your boundary, your experience, and they're looking at you, nodding, saying all the right things, but inside you can feel it. They're not with you. They're not in it. They're not trying to understand you. They're just trying to get to their turn. Now, there's a reason this happens. We live in a culture that rewards fast answers and quick comebacks more than slow listening and real empathy. We're trained to debate, defend, react. And when emotions come in, especially the uncomfortable ones like anger, grief, or shame, people get nervous. They want to make the discomfort go away, not lean into it. So instead of listening to understand, they listen for a gap, a place where they can insert their version of events or their advice or their judgment. It's self-P protection disguised as engagement. Remember a conversation where I was trying to explain to someone how hurt I felt. Not because of what they said, but how they said it. I was vulnerable. I was honest. And their response, well, I'm sorry you took it that way, but I didn't mean it like that. And there it was. The deflection, the shield, the subtle message that my experience didn't matter as much as their intent. That's not understanding. It's dodging. Here's what I know from my research. In emotionally charged conversations, up to 70% of what someone to. Your energy is sacred. Stop spending it on closed minds. Yours is shaped by their own beliefs, fears, and insecurities. That means if someone's not willing to examine their lens, it doesn't matter how carefully you explain yourself, it will always get distorted. It's not your job to fix that. You can be the most clear, calm, articulate version of yourself, and still some people will choose to hear what confirms their narrative. That's not on you. That's their unwillingness to enter the conversation with an open heart. And here's the thing. Understanding isn't about agreeing with every word you say. It's about someone leaning in with curiosity, not stepping back with defensiveness. It's about being willing to hold space for your experience, even if it's hard to hear. So when you're in a conversation and you feel yourself bending over backward to make them hear you, pause. Ask yourself, are they actually trying to understand me? Or are they just preparing their response? Because when you keep explaining to someone who listens only to react, not to relate, you're not having a conversation. You're participating in a performance where only one side has a script that matters. And your truth deserves more than that. Boundaries are clarity, not cruelty. Not cruelty. Let's take a breath here because this one can be hard for those of us who were taught explicitly or subtly that being kind means being endlessly available, agreeable, and accommodating. We grow up hearing things like, don't be rude, be the bigger person, or just explain it again so they understand. And somewhere along the way, we start to confuse kindness with self-abandonment. Neuroscience and psychology studies show that the brain processes social rejection and emotional stress in the same way it processes physical pain, repeated experiences of trying to be seen and not being received. That wears down our nervous systems over time. It shows up as anxiety, fatigue, even physical symptoms like brain fog and sleep disruption. That's not being too sensitive. That's biology. And yet so many of us still feel guilty when we say, I don't have the energy for this conversation right now. Or when we don't reply to that text that's just going to pull us into another exhausting loop of defending ourselves. But here's the reframe. That's not avoidance. That's stewardship. You are responsible for your energy, and how you spend it shapes your life. When you give it away freely to people who don't respect your boundaries, who aren't open to real dialogue, you're not being generous. You're being unsustainable, and unsustainable doesn't lead to connection. Heck, it leads to resentment, burnout, and disconnection from yourself, and eventually from the people you actually want to be close to. We all have people in our lives who leave us feeling more alive after a conversation, even when it's a hard one. That's the difference. They might challenge you, ask hard questions, even disagree with you, but they do it from a place of presence and care. You feel safe enough to be honest, not defensive, seen, not judged. That's where your energy belongs. Those are the places to invest. So if you find yourself over-explaining again and again to the same person, if you feel that heavy sinking feeling in your stomach every time you start crafting another explanation, pause. Ask yourself, is this worth the cost? Is this how I want to spend the limited energy I have today? You get to decide what conversations you enter. You get to protect your peace. And that's not selfish. That's sacred. The right people don't need the full backstory to believe you. Let me tell you something that still makes my shoulders drop every time I remember it. The people who are truly for you, the ones who love you, respect you, and value your truth, won't make you work so hard to be understood. You won't need a perfectly rehearsed explanation or a breakdown of your every motive. You won't have to build a case like a lawyer just to be taken seriously, because for them, your lived experience for emotional labor is real, and it's costing you is enough. So many of us were raised in environments, families, schools, even friend groups where our feelings came with a burden of proof. You couldn't just say, I'm hurt, or I'm not okay, or I don't want to talk about this. You had to justify it. You had to have evidence, logic, maybe even a timeline of events. You had to make your emotions digestible. And if you couldn't explain it clearly enough, you were dismissed or labeled too sensitive, dramatic, irrational. What that teaches us, often unconsciously, is that our truth isn't valid on its own, that it has to be earned, defended, proven. And so we carry that into adulthood. We find ourselves in relationships, workplaces, or even friendships where we default to that old pattern, over-explaining, over-justifying, apologizing before we even finish a sentence. We talk ourselves in circles, trying to preempt misunderstanding, all while shrinking just a little more each time. But here's what I've learned, both in my work and in my own messy, beautiful life. The right people, the safe people, don't require you to contort yourself for clarity. They don't need a thesis statement to validate your no. They don't need a 10-step breakdown of your why. They just need to know you. And that's enough. Because connection isn't about perfect communication. It's about trust. It's about relational safety. And when people truly trust you, they don't interrogate every emotional response. They don't poke holes in your logic or weaponize your vulnerability. They listen with the intention to know you, not to correct you. I once shared something deeply personal with someone, and their response was so simple, it almost made me cry. You don't have to explain. I trust you. That sentence stopped me in my tracks. Not because it was profound or poetic, but because it was safe. It was quiet and solid and exactly what I needed in that moment. A reminder that I'm not meant to earn compassion. I'm allowed to receive it. This is what we all long for, isn't it? To be met with understanding instead of suspicion. To be received without being dissected. To be seen in our fullness without needing to trim ourselves down to fit someone else's comfort. So if you find yourself constantly needing to explain and re-explain who you are, what you mean, or why you feel the way you do, I want you to consider that maybe the problem isn't your delivery. Maybe it's the audience. Maybe you're speaking your truth in rooms that were never designed to hold it. And when you stop talking long enough to notice who stays close, who leans in with soft eyes and steady presence, those are your people. They're the ones who will carry your story without needing all the details, because they already carry you with care. You don't need to explain yourself to be worthy of love. You don't need to be perfectly understood to be truly seen. The people who matter will feel you even five. The right people don't need the full backstory to believe you when your words are few. So here's what I want to leave you with. You are not here to spend your life convincing people of your worth. You are not here to dilute your truth for the sake of someone else's comfort. You are not here to keep knocking on closed doors, hoping that maybe this time they'll finally listen. You are here to stand in your integrity, to speak with clarity, to love with boundaries, to offer your story not to those who demand explanations, but to those who meet it with reverence. Every time you choose not to over-explain yourself, you are choosing self-respect over self-abandonment. You are saying, I am enough, even if you don't get it. And that is not arrogance. That is freedom. The next time you're tempted to keep talking, to keep spinning, to hand over more of your energy just to be understood, pause, breathe, come home to yourself. And remember, people who want to understand will ask with curiosity, not criticism. They will listen, not react. They will see you even in silence. You don't need to explain yourself to be valid. You don't need to be fully understood to be fully real. Protect your peace, honor your truth, and trust that the people who are meant to walk closing, you don't need permission to stand in your truth with you, will never need you to shrink to stay close. Be doing brave, beautiful work. Keep going. Good luck and stay grounded in your worth.